second-class city to allow it to happen.
The biggest issue is we need more housing.
Activists say overcrowding in shelters is at a crisis level, and they want the city to declare a state of emergency to get more spaces. The mayor counters that is not the answer. Advocates came in numbers wanting an urgent action plan, but Mayor John Tory says the solution lies in building more supportive housing. Farah Morelli joins us live now from Lamport Stadium. So, Farah, explain to us what declaring an emergency would do.
Well, Dwight, what it would allow the city to do is essentially two things: bring in more money and more bodies to help address this issue. You would see more temporary respite shelters like the one behind me here. You would see all three levels of government working together to come up with an urgent action plan. You might even see organizations like the Red Cross step in to help address this homelessness issue. But as you said, Mayor John Tory said again today he doesn't think this is going to solve the problem. And today some people on the front line say they agree.
I don't have a cot. I know, we'll try to get you a cot right now.
It's a video that offers a glimpse of just what it's like to sleep inside the city's warming centers. It shows rows and rows of cots, all full, while people walk about. It was captured secretly and released by these activists.
Homelessness crisis.
They called those conditions unacceptable and banded together to call for a declaration of an emergency.
This is a second-tier, second-class shelter system, and we are a second-class city to allow it to happen.
We're asking that the City of Toronto, City Council in particular, declare this as a state of emergency.
It's the second time in 2 months advocates have called for a state of emergency.
I think that my efforts and those of the City Council are best invested in making sure that what we get going forward is something that's going to provide us with a long-term answer to this.
And for the second time, the mayor said he doesn't think it would help, saying shelters are at about 96% capacity and that supportive housing is the answer.
We need to get going on this right away with the other governments, and that is supportive housing for the around 50% of people that our own surveys tell us are suffering from mental health or addiction issues.
I'd like to show you a vacant room.
This is Strawn House, a low-barrier home for people living with severe mental health and addiction issues.
This is the common space that is shared by 7 or 8 people.
It offers around-the-clock supports and independent living facilities, one of the only places of its kind in the city. It's overwhelmed by demand.
There just isn't enough highly supportive housing. I think the mayor is right. And I also want to add, I think the city has been really responsive to creating these new sites for respite, the emergency respites, the number of new shelters that have been created.
I think that's, if you want to call it a crisis, that's the crisis, a lack of variety of housing that is built to meet the needs of the people that we need to get off the streets, rather than building the housing and expecting people to fit into that type of housing.
So we understand now what kind of supporting housing we're talking about. The mayor says that has to be the emphasis, but he's also looking to other levels of government for support. So what are those other levels of government saying?
Well, Dwight, we did reach out to the Ministry of Housing, the Provincial Ministry of Housing today, this afternoon, and didn't get a response. But we did reach out to the feds as well, and we got a chance to speak to MP Adam Vaughan, also a former Toronto City Councillor. And what he said is that there is money available for these types of initiatives. And he said that the feds are ready and willing to sit down with the City of Toronto and start talking about this. But what they're waiting for is for some concrete plan that actually articulates what the city wants before they can move forward and start talking about supplying money for supportive housing.
All right, thank you, Farah. The icy temperatures made a tough job even tougher for firefighters this morning. They battled a 4-alarm fire on the Danforth at the Danforth Diner for hours. In the end, they won, but the Detroit Eatery was gutted. Greg Ross is live at the scene tonight on Danforth at Chester. And Greg, decades of history lost in that fire today.
Yeah, and still trying to determine what caused this fire tonight, Dwight. We have an investigator from the Toronto Fire Service on scene. He's been working with insurance adjusters to try and go through and figure out what started this fire. We believe it did start on the lower level of the Detroit Eatery, which is literally just on the other side of all this debris here behind me. You can see they still have a good section of the sidewalk here on the Danforth closed down as this investigation continues, and several other businesses were also are damaged by that fire here inside this tape behind me. They spent a good chunk of the day today pumping water out of the basement of these businesses. They said after they put that fire out, there was about 3 or 4 feet of water that they had to get through before they could begin this investigation. But one thing has become clear. That fire started in the Detroit Eatery. That's the building that suffered the bulk of the damage, and that means for some people, a building that was a very important part of their lives, some say a home away from home, is now destroyed.
This is the Danforth. Detroit was our clubhouse. It was everybody, every walk of life went in there.
Many regulars of the Detroit Eatery could only watch in horror as firefighters extinguished flames this morning. For the past 80 years, it has been a staple on the Danforth.
It's difficult, man. It's, you know, you think about places and what they mean to you, and this was the last of its kind. Like, this doesn't exist anymore.
This is so much the functioning heart of this neighborhood. Its door was open to anybody.
Inside, the restaurant's proud history was displayed on the walls, which were covered by dozens of framed photographs from over the years, now all gone, destroyed in the fire.
It was like a beautiful collage, I guess, of decades of memory and history.
And this had the laughing of the community. Like, it was truly a room that had seen so many people and so many amazing nights.
They, you know, the Stanley Cup, you know, they brought it down here, 3-4 times, they put it right in the restaurant on the counter over there,
Greg Tessenis is the owner of the building that is home to the Detroit Eatery. He says it's been in his family for around 60 years, and up until the 1980s, they even ran the restaurant.
After school, I used to come and serve coffees over there.
While he's not sure at this point if the restaurant or building can be salvaged, he says he can't imagine the Danforth without it.
I mean, I hate to see it go,
The family that owns the Detroit Eatery could only assess the damage from the outside after firefighters deemed it not safe to go in.
Floor has dropped a couple of feet down. There is a lot of damage, over $500,000 damage.
The owners of the neighboring businesses were allowed into their shops to try and salvage what they could. While the fire did not reach the inside of Becker's Bridal, it still suffered tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage from smoke and water.
It's tough to say. There's a lot of damage to that one building. Hopefully the 2 buildings on the adjoining side will be saved.
One thing is clear, regulars of the Detroit Eatery would like to see that restaurant open up again sometime in the near future. And people that I spoke with here tell me that they are going to rally around the owners of that restaurant. They want to help them get back on their feet. Some people have even started a GoFundMe page so people can help to try and support the family that owns that restaurant. But again, we're still in the stages of trying to determine first what caused that fire, and number 2, if that building and that restaurant can be salvaged, Dwight.
Yeah, very popular spot on the Danforth there. Thank you, Greg. And Colette, glad it warmed up a little bit because those firefighters, if they were out there yesterday battling that blaze, oh, just imagine.
That is a really good point, and it is one positive thing we can look at with the storm system that's moving in, that we get some milder temperatures. However, there are many components to this, and some of them quite nasty, including for what I see for tomorrow morning's commute, the potential there. Let me walk you through everything here. We have a special weather statement in place. It goes from southwestern Ontario to eastern Ontario, all the way up to the north, but certainly includes the city, all of the GTA in this. We're looking at about 5 centimeters of snow coming in overnight tonight before it changes over. And when it does change over, we could have this period perhaps a little bit extended towards tomorrow morning of freezing rain, or at least some mixed precipitation, making it slick on the roadways. Then it's tomorrow more towards the afternoon, or at least later day, when we're really going to see those winds kicking in and getting quite gusty. The temperature will keep coming up, but the problem is some of that warmer air moves in and it overrides cooler air at the surface. That's when we get into this freezing rain situation. And in fact, for Hamilton and around parts of the southern parts of the Golden Horseshoe, all the way back towards southwestern Ontario, it's actually a freezing rain warning that's in place. A little further towards the north, there'll be some enhancement to the snowfall. It will stay as snow and not make that changeover to a mix. And that's why there the amounts are 10, 15 centimeters of snow. Locally, perhaps some areas seeing even a little bit more than that. Now, just to show you where things are right now, we're just starting to see some of that light snow moving into southwestern Ontario. It's going to keep tracking eastward, so coming in later on towards about midnight. I want to show you the temperatures, how they stand at the moment. So we're at -4. The temperature is going to stay nearly steady there or start to come up a little bit as we go through the overnight hours. Already -2 back towards Windsor as this is moving in. As I walk you through, we get towards midnight, we have that snow coming in. Then it looks like that corridor from, say, 5, 6 a.m. towards about 9 or 10 where we could get into that mix through the area. Right now it's looking like a fairly fine line before it changes over to some rain, and that's what we'll see, and some heavier amounts as we go into the afternoon hours, 10, 15 millimeters of rain before this thing moves out tomorrow evening. So a lot coming our way. I know that's a lot to digest. We'll talk more about it a little later in the show, but just showing you overnight tonight, the temperature rising to about -1 or nearly steady. By tomorrow, 4 degrees with rain. Such a change we're seeing with this milder air moving in, Dwight.
Yeah, just in a couple of days. Thanks, Colette.
No problem.
The streets seem clear for drivers, but the bike lanes, they're a different story. I'm Chris Glover. Tonight, how the city plans to deal with this sloppy mess.
Premier Doug Ford's warning of a so-called carbon tax recession is being disputed by every economist we've spoken to, including the one Ford's own office cited as proof.
I'm here today to ring the warning bell that the risk of a carbon tax recession is very, very real. That's why
the Premier made the statement yesterday at the Economic Club of Canada. We asked his office staff for evidence to back it up, and they pointed to this study from the Conference Board of Canada. Well, nowhere in the study does it mention a carbon tax recession. In fact, one of its authors tweeted today, quote, "At no point in our research paper do we say that the carbon tax could cause a recession. We specifically describe the overall economic impact as small." To all this, the Premier tweeted today, "It's hard to believe economists with theories that making everything more expensive is a good idea." For the first time in 12 years, a new Canada Food Guide is served. Its goal to get Canadians to eat well. And this time around, Health Canada says the food industry was not involved. Experts say the recommendations made in the Food Guide are rooted in science with evidence to back them up. Christine Bierak explains.
It smells so good.
Let's dig in. This kids' cooking camp serves up exactly what Canada's new food guide is calling for. Recommended servings and the 4 food groups are out. Whole foods and home cooking are in.
How about I do the cheese?
You want to do it?
The major takeaway: how to build a plate. Ideally, half of it should be vegetables and fruit, a quarter protein-rich foods, including meat and dairy, but new emphasis is being put on nuts, beans, and seeds. The last quarter is whole grain foods, your bread, rice, quinoa, or pasta. Another big shift: make water your drink of choice.
The most important single takeaways are for parents, which are that juice and sugar-sweetened milks are beverages that should be limited and treated as treats for themselves and for their kids. Overall, though, the most important message is cook more, use less boxes, go to restaurants less frequently, not never, but less.
The new food guide also encourages Canadians to eat meals together, use food labels, and be aware of food marketing, often pushing processed foods high in sugar, salt, and fat.
It doesn't need to be complicated, folks. It just needs to be nutritious, and might I dare also say fun.
In response to losing their own food group, the Dairy Farmers of Canada are pushing back, saying scientific evidence confirms the nutritional benefits of dairy and its role in reducing chronic diseases, including heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, colorectal cancer, and hypertension.
I know that you have to eat everything in moderation, and we learned about it a lot in health class, and our parents always encourage healthy eating.
The new food guide will be taught in schools and promoted by health professionals. It'll also influence what is served at daycare, schools, rec centers, and hospitals across the country.
Just amount of spice.
Clearly, these kids are ahead of the game. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Some of the foods they recommend, like beans and lentils, are actually some of the cheapest foods that you can eat, and they're also the most health-promoting foods as well.
Still ahead, how realistic is it to fit this new guide into your daily routine? I go shopping with nutritionist Trudy Stone. She tries to dispel the myth that eating healthy actually costs more. That's coming up at 6:30. After hours of debate and just a day before the deadline, Brampton decides to allow pot retail shops in the city.
I'm proud of our city council. I thought they took all opinions in. We did our research, and I believe the motion put forward by Councillor Santos is the responsible choice for the city of Brampton. We're going to have the police funding to have zero tolerance on drug-impaired driving, and frankly, we did a process that really engaged the community.
City Council voted 8-3 last night in favor of the idea. The province set a deadline of midnight tonight for all cities to opt in or out of the retail stores. Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown says they waited this long to make sure they got it right, adding opting in gets them access to more provincial funding. And while Brampton has opted in, Mississauga, Whitby, Pickering, and Oakville have opted out, while Toronto, Oshawa, Burlington, and Aurora have decided to allow retail pot shops in their cities. There are some cities in Ontario who haven't made a decision yet. If they don't by midnight tonight, the cities will automatically be opted into the framework. Pot shops are expected to begin operating in April. Dylan Millard is keeping things consistent. The three-time convicted killer is appealing the verdict in his third murder case, just like he did the other two. Millard is arguing it was unreasonable for the judge to find him guilty of murdering his father. Wayne Millard was shot in the eye while he slept in 2012. Dylan Millard is also taking issue with the sentence he got in that case, saying it's unconstitutional that it was piled on top of his two previous convictions, meaning he won't be able to apply for parole until he's more than 100 years old. Millard is already appealing those first two convictions for killing Tim Bosma during a test drive and Laura Babcock, who he used to date. The ongoing diplomatic tension between China and Canada shows no sign of simmering down. China renewed its criticism of Canada's arrest of Huawei executive at the request of the U.S. Meng Wanzhou was detained in Vancouver in early December. That was closely followed by China's detention of two Canadians. But as Sasha Petrusik reports, Beijing is now shifting the blame towards Washington.
China continued to take a hard line today against both Canada and the U.S., first denouncing news that the U.S. is planning to continue pursuing the extradition of Meng Wanzhou from Canada, and secondly, attacking Canada for considering this extradition request. This happened at a regular foreign ministry briefing today, and this is what the spokeswoman had to say.
Anyone with fair judgment would determine that Canada had made a serious mistake in this matter from the very start, because Meng's case was not a regular judicial case. Canada and the United States arbitrarily abused their bilateral extradition treaty to seriously infringe upon a Chinese citizen's security and legal rights.
She went on to add that the U.S. should correct its mistake immediately, revoke the arrest warrant, and effectively drop the whole thing. This is, of course, what China's demand has been from the very beginning. It has been pressuring mostly Canada so far to release Meng Wanzhou. There have been a number of Canadians who have been treated quite severely by the legal system here in China, including, of course, the two that were arrested last month, and they are still being held. What we are hearing, though, is a little bit of a shift, apparently, and the attention seems to be shifting a little bit more toward the United States. Now, China did have a threat today. It said that China will take action if the U.S. takes these measures and goes ahead with the extradition request. One word that China did not use today is consequences. It did not say that there will be severe consequences if this goes ahead. That's usually a signal that something big is about to happen. And China in the past has not missed the opportunity to make that kind of threat. We didn't hear that threat today, but still a very hard line. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Beijing.
She's been stalked by tragedy. Everyone leaves me.
Dies.
The Oscar nominations are out. Coming up next, the snubs and surprises and how Toronto is featured in not one, but 2 nominees.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
They were all staring, weren't they? I can tell even if I can't see, and I heard the word fat, and ugly.
No one but me would dare, and I did not.
Scenes from The Favorite and Roma. The 2 films lead the pack of Oscar hopefuls with 10 nominations each. It's one of several stories to emerge after the big announcement earlier today. Eli Glasner is here to explain what caught his attention and some history made this morning.
Yeah, I mean, let's just mention Roma. You saw some of it off the top. Playing at TIFF tonight. I wonder if it's going to be a busy screening. 10 nominations for this movie produced by Netflix, a Spanish-language black and white film set in Mexico City. 10 nominations. That is something. Another something, well, let's take a look at, there it is, Black Klansman. So what's amazing about this? Well, Spike Lee, I mean, a legend, an institution, has been making movies for about 30 years since Do the Right Thing. Many of his movies have been Oscar nominated, but he's never actually gotten an Oscar nomination as a director until today. So justifiably so, getting it for Black Klansmen, which is the true story of a black police officer and a Jewish police officer going together to, yes, infiltrate the Klan. And that was nominated many times this morning. But also, let's take a look at Black Panther. And why is this making history? First time a comic book movie has cracked the Best Picture category. We always give the comic books, you know, the costume, the visual effects, but this movie, I mean, artistically, financially, it was just astounding. And so it is now Best Picture nominee, competing against the favorite, competing against Bohemian Rhapsody. But you know what? Ryan Coogler directed that thing. I don't know how you get that into the Best Picture category without a nomination for Coogler, without a nomination for Michael B. Jordan. I mean, as Killmonger, one of the best villains I've seen in years. And that's more than just a showy superhero performance, an amazing kind of rage-filled
performance. Sorry for him a little bit.
Exactly, exactly. Changed everything. So, unfortunately, Black Panther could have done better, but it did all right this morning.
All right, there's some of these races, though, are going to be just too close to call. A lot of good stuff this year.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Best Actor category, because this is kind of fascinating. So Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, might have heard he put on all that weight, playing the vice president. Bradley Cooper, the country crooner in Star is Born, didn't get a director nod, but acting nod. Rami Malek, Bohemian Rhapsody, he, I think, is the one to beat. Then you have Viggo Mortensen. Now, even though Viggo has had some stumbles this award season, he's been nominated. And then one of my personal faves, Willem Dafoe playing Van Gogh, the artist in At Eternity's Gate. But if you forced me to predict, I would put my money on Rami Malek. Let's take a look at the Best Supporting Actress category, because you might wonder, Eli, how did The Favorite get 10 nominations? Well, in this category alone, they have 2. So that's pretty interesting. Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz both competing against each other. They play these 2 women who are competing with the Queen's, basically for the Queen's affection. Plus, you have the actor from Roma, you have Regina King from If Beale Street Could Talk, and Amy Adams in Vice. This category, I would say Regina King. She is actually the one.
She won the Golden Globe,
She won the Golden Globe, and you remember that speech.
Yes, beautiful.
Picture perfect. She'll do it again.
All right. About the Canadian contenders, we have to do some CanCon here.
So, you know, here and there in short film category, in production design, but actually animation, in short animated film. Remarkable. 3 Canadians.
Really?
3 Canadian cartoons competing with each other. So let's run them down, beginning with Bao. Now, this is the one a lot of people might have seen. If you went to see Incredibles 2, you saw this movie directed by Domi Shi about a woman who makes a dumpling.
Oh, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
And the dumpling comes to life. And she actually was inspired by her own life growing up. You see Toronto make a little cameo, the CN Tower in the background in the park, and there's the adorable little dumpling that she raises. So there's that, and then we have animal behavior. Now this is interesting because it's a husband and wife team who are now based in Vancouver, David Vine and Alison Snowden. It is about a bunch of animals doing kind of group therapy. But this is their 4th Oscar nomination. They've already won 1. So you got, they're serious. And then finally, gorgeous looking short called Weekends. And this is another movie. You see the CN Tower there. This is from Trevor Jimenez. And it is about a young boy who is traveling between his 2 parents' houses because they're divorced, and it was inspired by Trevor's own time growing up and going back and forth between Hamilton and Toronto. So from those personal stories, possible Oscar glory. There you go.
All right, CanCon, we love it. And you know they're looking for a host, just in case you have free that night.
You know, I'm updating my reel, and I've sent it off. Well, you know, fingers crossed.
Thanks, Eli.
You're welcome.
Snow-covered bike lanes days after the storm. I'm Chris Glover, live at Spadina and Adelaide. Coming up after the break, how some cyclists are giving the city the gears over all of this.
Some cyclists in the city are complaining about snowy bike lanes today, saying the city's snow clearing efforts has failed them, especially since it hasn't snowed since the weekend. Chris Glover joins us live tonight from Spadina and Adelaide. Chris, two bike lanes intersect where you are, quite different when it comes to the snow clearing there.
It really depends if there's a physical barrier between the bike lane and the traffic. That's the case on Adelaide, so as a result, the lane is quite clear. But here on Spadina, a very different story. Take a look at all of the snow right here at the edge. This is what cyclists have to contend with, and as a result, many cyclists are saying that it's problematic, it's dangerous, and they want the city to clean up its act.
If the snow's still there, the wheel will follow the groove of the snow, and my steering is out of control.
Hunter Sanassian uses hydraulic brakes and thicker tires to get a fighting chance in the winter.
If it gets really, really dangerous, if I don't feel safe on the road in certain circumstances, I will be on the pedestrian lane, which is just the only way to feel safe.
The food delivery biker needs to ride year-round, and despite the fact the snow fell over the weekend, here we are on Tuesday, and snow in the bike lane is still a problem.
I've done this for a few years, so I know that it doesn't get better until the whole snow just melts away.
Well, that's not what snow clearing in a city is supposed to be.
No, it's not. I agree.
Biker Paul Carter also had a white-knuckle ride today.
I rode down Sherburne, and it was quite sketchy. I almost lost my balance in a rut at one point in the bike lane.
In 8 years biking in Toronto, he's seen huge improvements, though.
On Saturday night, I rode on Woodbine, and the bike lane was better than the road, so that was nice.
The mayor says bike lanes are a priority, and not just maintenance, expanding the network as well, and he anticipates some $44 million to be budgeted for bike lanes in 2019. Transportation Services says bike lanes on main routes get the same priority as the street itself.
If there's not a separated bike lane, again, the challenge is that cars are pulling out of driveways, pulling snow onto the road. So we do have to be diligent, but we do, realize that it does take sometimes between 4 and 6 hours to do a round of salting and plowing on those main arterial roadways. So we eventually do cycle back and get it.
Still, so that's like a few hours, though. Now we're a couple days into this. Wouldn't it be dealt with by now?
You know what? If we have issues out there right now, you're exactly right. Please call 311. And we can investigate those within 24 hours and get some equipment back out there.
To that timeline, Hunter Sanassian has one message for the city.
I would say, please get your SH *** together. I want to keep safe. I want to keep riding.
And so the city was also saying that it has crews out throughout neighborhoods, making sure that lanes like this are not covered. But if you notice one, to call 311 and they'll get a crew out as quickly as they can. Dwight?
Sure, folks are calling right now. Thank you, Chris. A 20-year-old man has died in hospital after crashing his car into a Leaside bridge on Saturday. It happened before dawn and no other vehicle was involved. The driver mounted the curb and smashed into a bridge support. A passenger who was also 20 was seriously injured.
Right there, buddy.
I have a gray Buick.
It's just sad to see how many people are not getting the message.
Toronto police say they nabbed 670 drivers during their anti-distracted driving campaign last week. Officers hung out on TTC vehicles to spot drivers using handheld devices, then tipped off their colleagues to pull them over. The campaign was timed to highlight the new, more expensive penalties brought in this month. At first offense, that's going to set you back $1,000 and 3 demerit points, or up to $1,000, and could also get you a 3-day suspension. Tonight, members of Pride Toronto will vote on whether police should be allowed to march in the annual Pride Parade. The organization gave police the green light to apply for the festivities late last year after a 2-year ban, but after an uproar from members, tonight's vote was called. Taylor Simmons is live at Ryerson University, where the meeting is taking place. And Taylor, some members are saying they've lost faith in the leadership.
Yeah, some members are saying that, and they're saying there definitely needed to be way more consultation before giving police that green light to apply to be a part of the parade this year. But first, Dwight, let me address why we're outside here. It's because they told us we're not allowed in the meeting before or during. So, but quickly, let me give you some background on why this is all happening in the first place. 3 years ago, you'll remember, Black Lives Matter stopped the parade, demanding that police, uniformed police, and their floats be banned from the festivities. That's because of historic tensions between police and the LGBT community. Those tensions intensified last year with the Bruce McArthur investigation, and police say they were happy to get the okay to participate because they've tried hard to work on some of those problems that were identified. But some members say there hasn't been enough healing over that 2-year period where the ban was in place to let police come back in, and we spoke to some of those members tonight before going in about how they feel.
There's 6,000 policemen in Toronto, in Toronto Force. They deal with everything from sexual assaults to murder to, well, you name it. And some of them are openly lesbian gay, and they should be allowed to participate in their community festival.
It's like taunting people who have had problems with police. And many of us, I'm 58 years old, many of us of a certain age have had problems with police in the past. And right now, in support of people of color, I am here to say no police in Pride.
So, Dwight, some members here today were saying, I went to a meeting last month asking why this happened, why they were lifting this ban, and we've just come across a confidential document that Pride Toronto had sent to their members, and they said Pride Toronto could not withstand any threats to its funding and continue to operate. It became clear that while our funding arrangements in the past could withstand our policy on police participation, our future funding could not. So the realization that funding may have played a role in this decision had some people angry here tonight. And we did ask Pride Toronto's executive director to join us for an interview. She said she won't be speaking until tomorrow. But Dwight, as part of tonight's vote, they're going to be looking into changing some bylaws within Pride Toronto. So there is more consultation in the future.
All right, we'll keep on top of it. Thank you, Taylor.
It puts more focus on what, when, and how we eat, and less on food groups and servings.
Canada's new food guide is now out, and it looks a little different. Gone is the emphasis on food groups and recommended servings. Now, it calls for us to fill half our plates with fruits and veggies and make water our drink of choice. It not only serves up suggestions for what to eat, but how you should be doing it. So what do all the changes mean for your grocery shopping and your dinner? I met with nutritionist Trudy Stone at Fiesta Farms for some help.
The number one thing I like to recommend that people put in their carts is dark leafy greens. So many abundance of nutrients can be found in dark leafy greens. You can get calcium, you can get, magnesium, so many antioxidants that's really going to help to prolong your life and help to prevent heart disease as well.
The big question is for a lot of people affordability, because it seems like it's really expensive to eat healthy.
It's a myth. Don't listen to it.
Okay. I mean, in the food court at work anyway, the burger costs a lot less than going to the stand and getting some veggies.
This is true, and that's why you need to make more meals at home, which is another thing that they recommended that I absolutely loved.
Portions.
Yes.
They've kind of stepped away from saying you have to have this much dairy or this much. What are they talking about with this change?
I think they just want people to be a lot more intuitive when it comes to eating and just really paying attention to how your body feels when you eat something. There's actually, an ancient theory. It's called Hara-Hachi Bu, which is essentially just eating until you're 80% full. So when you feel you're about 80% full, that's when you know you need to pull it back and just stop a little bit and just check yourself to make sure that you're not overeating.
So Trudy, let's talk about some of the foods that you've adapted to be more in line with the food guide and I guess also more affordable.
Okay, so one of my favorite dishes is butter chicken.
Yes.
So what I do sometimes is I replace the chicken with tofu instead. So it's a much healthier alternative and it still tastes absolutely delicious.
It does taste delicious.
It does, I promise, I promise.
I heard you're also a big fan of
lentils. Yes, I love them. Lentils helped me to lose 30 pounds 5 years ago, so I'm a huge fan of them.
Really? 30
yes,
pounds
30 pounds,
okay.
Yeah, so I've stuck with them.
Let's talk about how you were able to pull that off. We've got some right here.
Okay, so one of the things I love to do is actually to put lentils in my dessert. So what I do, and I see your face, and I know you're not
lentils
convinced.
and desserts.
So, let me break it down for you.
Okay.
So what I like to do is I like to cook the lentils, I turn them into a puree, and I replace the butter with the lentils instead. So I've made these coconut chocolate chip lentil blondies that taste absolutely delicious, and you would never know that these guys were snuck in there.
Also, they're talking about eating being social.
Right.
Don't eat by yourself. What's that all about?
Well, you know, the more that you eat with people is the more that you're going to enjoy the food, and the more that you're going to be mindful of the food that you're eating as well.
Why is it important that we share our meals?
Because it really fosters that connection with people, especially at the end of the day. You have a long work day, you come home, you know, you make your meal with your family, you sit down and you enjoy that meal together. And a lot of people these days are just eating a lot more meals in front of their screens because they're so busy. But this way, it's just really about taking a time out and just really enjoying and being more mindful of that meal that you're eating.
With Canada revamping its food guide, we thought we could take a look at how other countries around the world do theirs, like Canada is now doing. Japan's guide puts an emphasis on water consumption. It's modeled after a spinning top, a popular toy in the country. The West African nation of Benin shows a traditional thatched roof home. Water is at the entrance as a symbol of hospitality and a reminder to consume plenty of it. In Sweden, a much different look. No fancy visuals here, just a simple list emphasizing what you should be eating. Canada also has versions designed specifically for Inuit, First Nations, and Métis people. Okay, all this food talk probably has your stomach grumbling. Well, we're going to take you quickly now to Hamilton. Suresh Das introduces us to a burger shop that probably doesn't meet these new guidelines, but it's still a smash.
My name is Ben Greco. Welcome to Delirious Burger Company. We're located in the community of Westville in Hamilton, Ontario. So what we do at Delirious Burger is an old school smash burger. If you're not familiar with a smash burger, we take one of our 4-ounce balls, put it on a very hot surface, smash it into the grill. That kind of creates a sear on the bottom surface of the burger, which locks in all the flavor, locks in all the juices, gives you that, premier burger taste. I fell in love with the burger when I was first introduced to it, and just always tried to do it myself at home, try to perfect my own recipes, and thought I was really onto something, so I just kind of kept building from there.
It's fun because you get to work with your teammates.
Oh yeah! Oh, nice!
Bringing curling to a new generation. Was it a hit or a miss with these children? We'll let them tell you next. Rocks and Rings went back to its roots today. 10 years ago, the school curling program kicked off right here in the GTA by showing kids at Three Valleys Public School in North York the fun of the sport. Hundreds of schools later, they celebrated their anniversary by returning to that original spot, and we tagged along.
Here we go, grab your rocks. Big shots this time, big shots.
This is their first introduction, so this is what they think curling is.
Oh, you don't have to skate? Oh, yeah, I'm totally doing it again.
We have to teach them it's normally played on ice.
That would be too hard.
It gives them the opportunity to learn about it so that they can be exposed before they get to the ice.
Well, yeah, I think you can see that they like to win. They like to make shots, and that's, that's a good start if you ever wanted to get into the game and be really good at it.
How old were you when you started playing?
I was 7 years old. A lot of the kids this age, and hopefully they would stick with it like I did, and you can play it at the most recreational level or at the top level.
I was bumping the other team's rocks. I feel very happy, and I start shouting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
When I got in the middle and we scored a point, it was really fun. I was really excited that my team and I were winning. We weren't winning, we were trying our hardest, and we were curling for the first time.
All right, grab your rocks again. We're gonna play one more end, one more end.
The other team won, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was to have fun.
It's with a heavy heart, but also with great joy, to welcome pitching great Roy Halladay into the Hall of Fame.
It's a shame he's not around to see it, but what an honor for former Blue Jay Roy Halladay. While with the Jays, Halladay made 6 All-Star teams and won the Cy Young Award as the American League's best pitcher. Halladay died just over a year ago when the plane he was flying crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. Last summer, the Jays retired his number. He is heading to Cooperstown with Mariano Rivera, Mike Mussina, and Edgar Martinez. Quite an honor for Mr. Halladay.
Yes, it's too bad it comes now, but at least our congratulations certainly go to his family.
Yeah, it is a bit bittersweet.
Yeah, for this honor. Well, we have a lot to talk about. So many components, as I've been saying, about the storm system moving in. If there's only one thing you take away, and I hope you're going to take away more than that, but if there's only one thing, it's that tomorrow is going to be a wet day on the roadways, on the streets and the sidewalks, but that tomorrow morning especially, it could also be slick with some mixed precipitation and some freezing rain. That's the most important thing I need you to know. Now we'll walk through all of the different things that are going on here. Snowfall first, that's already moved into southwestern Ontario. I'll show you some of the accumulations, but in general, it's going to be around 5 centimeters for the GTA. Then that risk of getting into a mix as we get towards the early morning hours, and by tomorrow afternoon, some very strong and gusty winds from the southwest, and that's why there's the special weather statement in place. For Hamilton and points going around towards St. Catharines, Niagara, it's a freezing rain warning, and that extends all the way back into southwestern Ontario, where at that point, Windsor area, Sarnia, most of it's going to happen in the overnight hours. Closer to the GTA, it could be those morning commute hours. The current temperatures nearly steady around -4. They'll be coming up, kind of creeping up slowly, and definitely you'll notice it'll get milder tomorrow. Eventually, this is changing over to rain. It will come in as light snow. Broader perspective shows you some of the lighter stuff well back to the west of us, but moving in our direction, moves in overnight, and then we get into, say, 5, 6 a.m., a bit of a mix in here, some sleet, some freezing rain when it freezes on contact possible, and then eventually, say, after 10 or getting towards lunch hours, the temperature comes up, it changes over to rain, but we could see 10, 15 millimeters of rain before it moves out tomorrow evening. Then into Thursday, a quieter day with just some flurries, likely some lake effect stuff into the latter part of the day. Snowfall potential, this is why I say closer to 5 centimeters for the city, certainly more getting up to a snowfall warning when you head up there a little further north towards Muskoka. Overnight tonight. So there's temperatures coming up, but it's going to take some time until they do. That's why we see snow, then that mix, eventually rain from lunch hour on to tomorrow afternoon and in the evening. Temperatures in the afternoon around 4, but we may actually see this temperature coming up a few degrees more by tomorrow evening with those strong southwesterly winds. After that, slightly mild air in place for Thursday, and then cold air moves back into White Thursday night, and it's going to stick around at least Friday and Saturday, a little more moderated into Sunday.
looks tropical on Wednesday. 4. Wow, thanks, Colette.
Yeah, by the afternoon, in the evening, even milder.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Their stories are filled with stories about motherhood and parenthood, stories about their own relationships with their parents, their stories of joy and resilience and courage and just exuberance.
After the break, sharing their stories in their own words. We'll introduce you to a program and magazine that's giving 12 young mothers a voice with the help of some award-winning writers. Stay with us. We'll be right back. A Toronto creative writing program unveiled its latest magazine last night, featuring stories from a dozen teen moms. Sister Writes partners with women's centers across the city, giving women a space to share their stories. Kelda Ewan takes us on a tour.
This all happened at the age of 14. I was feeling sick and throwing up.
15-year-old Nicole Confalone begins reading an excerpt of her writing in front of a packed room.
That day when my mom picked me up, I told her. Surprisingly, she was calm.
In the audience, her 5-month-old baby, Angel Rose, the subject of her story that's now among the 12 pieces that make up the new anthology from Sister Writes. The program was founded in 2010 by writer Lauren Kirshner. The aim was to teach creative writing to the city's marginalized women, those experiencing things like homelessness, trauma, addiction, and other mental health issues. Though that's not always the case, this past fall it partnered with Jessie's, the June Colwood Center for Young Women, to provide workshops to young mothers who attend the high school within its walls. A group of acclaimed female writers helped them craft their story.
Their stories are filled with stories about motherhood and parenthood, stories about their own relationships with their parents, their stories of joy and resilience and courage and just exuberance.
Have you ever experienced a moment so beautiful that your dreams become more vivid?
Daniela Bowen had her daughter when she was 17. She says she's experienced the stigma surrounding teen mothers. She says sharing her story made her feel powerful.
You can be free. You can just write whatever you want. It can be fiction, it can be real, anything you want. I feel open. I feel like no one can judge me about what I'm writing, what I'm saying, and yeah, I just feel free, yeah.
Their stories are often, mistold or they're maligned in some way because they're young moms. I think they feel an immense measure of pride, not only in their children, but in the stories they're able to tell.
For 21-year-old Shahida Alam, her son Joseph became the star of her fictionalized story.
There was a little Cree boy from Fort Albany First Nation named Joseph Paul Martin. I think about him a lot when I write.
And through the program,
I guess I realized maybe I want to pursue a career in writing. I learned that I like writing a lot. Joseph smiles and says, "Mommy, I love that story."
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
It's going to be a messy 24 hours out there. Colin is back next to tell you all about it. Stay with us. We're back in just 2 minutes. I'm thinking about that day when it gets up to 4, all the snow that we didn't get rid of. Is that going to wash away, or do we have to go out there and work on it?
We should see enough that it's going to help you out with the shoveling, because it will wash a decent amount away when we're talking 10, 15 millimeters of rain. So once that temperature comes up later in the day, it's just wet conditions we're dealing with. It's tomorrow morning's commute that I just want everyone to kind of allow some extra time for, because we have that risk. Yes, messy, seeing some freezing rain in there, and because of that, we could have some very slick roadways. So overnight tonight, we see the temperature nearly steady, then starting to come up towards the morning hours, -1. So the snow around 5 centimeters, changing over to some mixed precipitation with some freezing rain, a risk in there. And then the temperature continues to come up, and it turns over to rain to wash away some of the snow that's been plaguing Dwight in his driveway. Everybody is right. 4 degrees in the afternoon. The temperature will likely actually rise a little bit beyond that. By tomorrow evening, we may see it go up to 5, 6 degrees, but winds are going to be pretty strong out of the southwest because of that.
It's just going to get cold again. But Colin has us covered. That's it for us for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight at 11. Colin and I will see you back here tomorrow at 6.